Sarah gripped the railing, staring at the bold red, white, and blue flag that snapped defiantly in the breeze. How dare they? After everything she and her husband had sacrificed, the HOA wanted to fine them for displaying the symbol of their country. But Sarah wasn't going down without a fight. This was about more than just a flag. It was about the very freedoms they had sworn to protect. The glint in her eye darkened with resolve. The HOA had no idea what they were up against. This was war. Sarah stormed into the HOA meeting, her green eyes blazing. This is an outrage. You can't fine us for hanging an American flag on our own property. The HOA president, a prim woman named Carol, regarded her with cool disdain. I'm afraid the covenants are quite clear, Mrs. Hendricks. No decorations or displays are permitted without prior approval. The flag violates our aesthetic standards. Sarah's husband, Mike, stepped forward, his jaw set. Aesthetic standards. This is the flag our soldiers have died for. How dare you try to suppress our freedom of expression? Carol sniffed. Perhaps you should have read the fine print more carefully before purchasing your home. Rules are rules. Sarah slammed her palms on the table, eyes blazing. I don't care about your precious rules. This is our home, and that flag stays up. You'll have to drag me off my own porch to take it down. Mike placed a restraining hand on her arm. Easy, Sarah. We'll handle this the right way. He turned to Carol, voice measured. Look, we're reasonable people. Can't we find a compromise? Compromise? Carol scoffed. The guidelines are non-negotiable. Either remove the flag or pay the fine. Those are your options. Sarah opened her mouth, but Mike squeezed her arm. Understood. We'll review our options. As they walked out, Sarah fumed. Options? What options? I'm not taking down that flag, Mike. Not now. Not ever. Mike sighed. I know, honey. But we have to be smart about this. There's got to be a way to fight this without losing our home. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Watch me. That night, Sarah sat at her computer, fingers flying across the keyboard. She'd show that stuck-up HOA president a thing or two about messing with an American family. Hours later, a grim smile spread across her face. Perfect. The next day, Sarah marched into the HOA meeting, a thick folder under her arm. I have something to share with all of you. Carol eyed her warily. What is the meaning of this interruption, Mrs. Hendricks? Sarah slammed the folder on the table, a triumphant glint in her eye. I've done my research, and you know what I found? Your precious covenants are in direct violation of federal law. Carol's brow furrowed. I beg your pardon. Sarah's smile widened. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 prohibits homeowners associations from restricting the display of the American flag. You're breaking the law, and I've got the evidence to prove it. The room erupted in murmurs as Carol's face paled. This is outrageous. You can't. Oh, but I can. Sarah leaned forward, eyes gleaming. And if you don't rescind that ridiculous fine and allow us to fly our flag, I'll take you to court. And trust me, you don't want to mess with a Marine's wife. The room fell silent as the HOA members exchanged uneasy glances. Carol swallowed hard, then nodded stiffly. Very well. The fine is rescinded. You may display your flag. Sarah's grin widened. I thought you'd see it our way. As she and Mike walked out, Sarah felt a surge of triumph. No one messed with her family and got away with it. This was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Sarah's triumphant mood quickly soured. Despite the HOA's begrudging agreement to let them keep the flag, the tension in the neighborhood was palpable. Neighbors who had once waved and chatted now averted their eyes when she passed by. Even the mailman seemed to give her a wide berth. I don't understand it, Mike, she vented one evening, pacing the living room. We won, didn't we? Why are they still acting like we're the bad guys? Mike sighed, running a hand through his graying hair. You know how these HOAs are, honey. They don't like it when you challenge their authority. And a lot of the other residents probably just want to avoid rocking the boat. Sarah scowled. Well, I'm not going to tiptoe around and let them bully us. This is our home too, and we have every right to display that flag. Mike reached out, pulling her into a gentle embrace. I know, love. But let's try to be the bigger people here, okay? The last thing we need is more drama with the neighbors. Sarah opened her mouth to protest, then let out a frustrated huff. Fine, but the second they try anything else, I'm not holding back. Over the next few weeks, the Hendricks flag remained defiantly in place, a bold splash of patriotism against the sea of uniform white picket fences. Sarah watched with growing unease as the neighbors' furtive glances turned to outright scowls. Occasionally, she'd catch them huddled in whispered conversations, eyes darting in her direction. Then, one morning, disaster struck. Sarah hurried out to retrieve the newspaper, only to find the flag lying in a crumpled heap on the porch. Her heart lurched as she bent to examine it, fingers trembling with rage. The flag had been deliberately torn down and damaged. Mike, she screamed, her voice shrill with fury. Get out here. Her husband came running, eyes widening at the sight of the desecrated flag. What the? They did this. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. I knew they couldn't stand to see us fly that flag. Those petty, cowardly. Whoa, easy there, Sarah. Mike placed a restraining hand on her arm. Let's not jump to conclusions. We don't know who did this for sure. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Oh, I think we do. And I'm going to make them pay. She stormed back into the house, Mike trailing behind her. Sarah, wait. Where are you going? To the HOA meeting, she called over her shoulder, and this time, I'm not leaving until they agree to replace that flag. And if they don't, her lips curved in a grim smile. Well, let's just say they're in for the fight of their lives. Mike groaned, hurrying to catch up. Sarah, please, can't we just? But his wife was already out the door, her steps quickening with each passing second. Mike shook his head, muttering a silent prayer as he followed her. This was not going to end well. The tension in the HOA meeting room was palpable as Sarah strode in, Mike trailing reluctantly behind her. All eyes turned to the tattered American flag clutched in her hands, and a hush fell over the room. Sarah slammed the flag down on the table, her green eyes blazing. One of you did this, and I want to know who. Carol, the HOA president, cleared her throat, her typically composed demeanor visibly shaken. Mrs. Hendricks, I can assure you that the HOA had nothing to do with the destruction of your flag. Sarah's lips curled in a scornful smile. Oh, really? Then how do you explain this? She gestured at the flag, her voice dripping with contempt. Because it sure looks like someone went out of their way to tear it down. A murmur of discomfort rippled through the assembled homeowners, and several of them shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Carol raised a placating hand. I understand your anger, but accusing your neighbors without evidence is not. Evidence. Sarah cut her off, her voice rising. I've got plenty of evidence. This wasn't an accident, and I'm willing to bet every single one of you had a hand in it. Mike placed a hand on his wife's arm, trying to calm her. Sarah, let's not make this any worse. I'm sure the HOA will. The HOA will do nothing. Sarah snapped, shrugging off his touch. They're the ones who started this whole mess, and now they're going to fix it. She turned back to the assembled homeowners, her gaze sweeping the room. I'd want that flag replaced, and I'd want a public apology from whoever is responsible. The room erupted in a cacophony of protests and denials, but Sarah remained steadfast, her expression unyielding. Finally, Carol raised her hand, silencing the room. Mrs. Hendricks, we understand your frustration. But nothing. Sarah interrupted, her voice low and dangerous. You have 24 hours to replace that flag and issue a public apology, or I'm taking this to court. And trust me, you don't want to test me on this." She turned and stormed out of the room, Mike hurrying to catch up with her. "Sarah, wait. You can't just—" "Yes, I can," she snapped, her eyes gleaming with determination. "This is about more than just a flag, Mike. It's about our freedom, our rights as American citizens. And I'll be damned if I'm going to let some petty bureaucrats trample all over that." Mike sighed, his shoulders slumping in resignation. "I know how much this means to you, honey, but please try to keep a level head. Going to war with the HOA isn't going to solve anything." Sarah's expression softened, and she reached out to squeeze his hand. "I know, Mike, but sometimes you have to be willing to fight for what's right. And this," she glanced back at the tattered flag, her jaw set with resolve. "This is worth fighting for." Mike opened his mouth to respond, but Sarah was already turning away, her steps quickening with purpose. He shook his head, a glimmer of pride mixed with trepidation in his eyes. There was no stopping her now. The next day, Sarah arrived home to find a brand new American flag fluttering proudly on her porch. A crisp, white envelope lay beside it, bearing the HOA's seal. With a wary glance around the neighborhood, she snatched it up and tore it open. "Dear Mrs. Hendricks," the letter began, the words stiff and formal. "On behalf of the Homeowners Association, we wish to express our sincere apologies for the unfortunate incident involving the desecration of your American flag." Sarah's eyes narrowed as she continued reading. "We've investigated the matter thoroughly and have determined that the actions of one of our members were in direct violation of our community's principles. This individual has been reprimanded and will be required to make a public apology at our next meeting." She paused, her fingers tightening around the paper. "In addition, we have replaced the damaged flag with a new one, as a gesture of our commitment to upholding the values of this great nation. We hope that this resolution will help to mend the rift that has formed within our community." Sarah's lip curled in a derisive snort. "Mend the rift, ha! As if a new flag and a half-hearted apology could make up for what they've done." She crumpled the letter in her fist, her mind racing. The HOA was clearly trying to appease her, to make this all go away quietly. But Sarah wasn't about to let them off the hook that easily. "Mike," she called, striding into the house. "Get in here, we need to talk." Her husband emerged from the kitchen, a concerned frown on his face. "What is it, honey?" "I saw the new flag, but—" "It's not enough," Sarah interrupted, thrusting the crumpled letter at him. "They think a little apology and a replacement flag is going to make up for what they did. But I'm not buying it." Mike scanned the letter, his brow furrowing. "Sarah, this seems like a decent compromise. Maybe we should just—" "Compromise?" Sarah scoffed, her eyes flashing with anger. "After what they did? No way. This is about more than just a flag, Mike. It's about standing up for our rights, for the principles that our country was built on." She began pacing the living room, her mind whirring. "They think they can just sweep this under the rug, but I'm not going to let them. We're going to take this all the way, Mike. I'm filing a lawsuit against the HOA." Mike's eyes widened in alarm. "A lawsuit? Sarah, are you sure that's the best?" "I'm sure," she cut him off, her voice firm. "This is our home, our community, and we have a right to display the American flag without fear of retaliation. And if the HOA wants to try and stop us, then they're going to have to go through me." She paused, her gaze locking with his. "Are you with me, Mike?" Her husband hesitated, clearly torn between his desire to avoid conflict and his loyalty to his wife. Finally, he sighed and nodded. "All right, Sarah. If this is what you want, then I'm with you. But promise me you'll at least try to be reasonable about this." Sarah's lips curved in a determined smile. "Reasonable? Oh, don't worry, Mike. I'm about to show them just how reasonable I can be." With that, she turned and strode out of the room, her mind already whirring with strategies and legal maneuvers. The HOA had no idea what was coming. The air in the HOA meeting room was thick with tension as Sarah Hendricks strode through the doors, Mike trailing reluctantly behind her. All eyes turned to the pair, the unease palpable. Sarah wasted no time, her gaze sweeping the room. Thank you all for being here today. I'm sure you can imagine why I've called this meeting. Carol, the HOA president, cleared her throat, her face a mask of forced civility. Mrs. Hendricks, we've already addressed the issue of your flag. I believe we reached a satisfactory resolution. Sarah's lips curled in a sardonic smile. Satisfactory. You think tearing down my flag and then issuing a half-hearted apology is satisfactory? Several of the homeowners shifted uncomfortably in their seats, casting furtive glances at one another. Mrs. Hendricks, I can assure you that, Carol began, but Sarah cut her off with a raised hand. Save it, Carol. I'm not interested in your excuses. Her gaze hardened. I'm here to let you all know that I'm filing a lawsuit against this HOA. The room erupted in a cacophony of outraged protests, but Sarah held up her hand, silencing them. This isn't just about a flag, she continued, her voice rising above the din. It's about our rights as American citizens. The Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 clearly prohibits homeowners associations from restricting the display of the flag. And you people, she swept her gaze across the room, have flagrantly violated that law. Carol's face flushed with indignation. Mrs. Hendricks, I must insist that you reconsider. Lawsuits will only serve to further divide our community. Sarah's eyes narrowed. Divide the community? You did that the moment you tried to take down my flag. This is about upholding the values that our country was founded on, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let you trample all over them. She leaned forward, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. So, here's how this is going to go. You have 48 hours to publicly apologize, not just to me, but to every homeowner in this community. And you're going to make a donation to a veterans charity in the amount of $10,000. The room erupted in outraged murmurs, but Sarah held up her hand, silencing them once more. If you don't comply, I'll be filing that lawsuit, and trust me, you don't want to see what I've got up my sleeve. Her lips curved in a humorless smile. This isn't a negotiation, Carol. It's an ultimatum. She turned to leave, but paused, her gaze sweeping the room. And if any of you so much as look at my flag the wrong way, you'll be hearing from my lawyer. Are we clear? Without waiting for a response, she strode out of the room, Mike hurrying to catch up with her. The stunned silence in the room was deafening. As Sarah and Mike walked out of the HOA meeting, an ominous tension hung in the air. The once peaceful neighborhoods seemed to vibrate with a palpable sense of unease, and Sarah couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. Well, that certainly shook things up, Mike murmured, casting a wary glance over his shoulder. Sarah's lips curled into a determined smile. Good. It's about time someone stood up to that tyrannical HOA. I just hope you know what you're doing, Sarah. Mike's brow furrowed with concern. Threatening them with a lawsuit is a pretty bait escalation. They could make things really difficult for us. Difficult? Sarah scoffed, her pace quickening. They already made things difficult when they tried to take down our flag. This is about more than just us, Mike. It's about defending the principles that our country was built on. Mike sighed, his shoulders slumping slightly. I know, honey. I know how much this means to you. But I just can't shake the feeling that we're opening up a whole can of worms here. Sarah reached out and squeezed his hand, her gaze softening. I understand your concerns, Mike. But sometimes you have to be willing to fight for what's right, no matter the cost. As they approached their home, Sarah's eyes immediately landed on the gleaming American flag, snapping proudly in the breeze. A surge of fierce pride swelled within her, and she straightened her shoulders, determination etched into every line of her face. Look at that flag, Mike, she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. That's what we're fighting for. The freedom to express our patriotism, our love for this country, without fear of retaliation. She turned to face him, her gaze unwavering. I won't back down, Mike. Not this time. I'm going to see this through, no matter what it takes. Mike held her gaze for a long moment, then slowly nodded. All right, Sarah. If this is what you feel you need to do, then I'm with you. But please, promise me you'll be careful. Sarah's lips curved in a reassuring smile. Don't worry, Mike. I know exactly what I'm doing. She paused, then added, and I promise I won't let them win. With that, she turned and strode up the porch steps, her mind already racing with the next steps in her plan. The HOA had no idea what they were up against. Over the next 48 hours, the Hendricks household became the center of a rapidly escalating storm. Despite Sarah's ultimatum, the HOA remained stubbornly silent, refusing to issue the demanded public apology or make the requested charitable donation. They're stalling. Sarah fumed, pacing the living room as Mike watched with growing unease. They think they can wait me out, but they're about to learn just how determined I can be. Mike reached out, gently grasping her arm. Sarah, maybe we should take a step back and reconsider our approach. This is getting out of hand. And out of hand. Sarah cut him off, her eyes blazing. Mike, they desecrated the American flag. They trampled all over our rights as citizens. I'm not going to back down just because they're playing hardball. She pulled away, her jaw set with determination. I'm filing that lawsuit, Mike, and I'm going to make sure they regret the day they ever crossed us. With that, she stormed out of the room, leaving Mike to stare helplessly after her. He shook his head, a weary sigh escaping his lips. Oh, Sarah, what have you gotten us into? The next day, the Hendricks mailbox held a thick envelope bearing the HOA's seal. Mike retrieved it, his brow furrowed with trepidation. As he read through the contents, his eyes widened in alarm. Sarah, you need to see this. Sarah emerged from the kitchen, her face etched with concern. What is it, Mike? The HOA, he said, his voice tight with strain. They're filing a lawsuit against us. They're claiming we're in violation of their bylaws and demanding that we remove the flag immediately. Sarah's expression hardened, her hands clenching into fists. So, that's how they want to play it. Huh. Well, they're about to learn that they've picked the wrong family to mess with. She snatched the envelope from Mike's hands, her eyes scanning the document. This is just the beginning, Mike. I'm going to bury them in so much legal paperwork, they won't know which way is up. Mike reached out, placing a gentle hand on her arm. Sarah, please, can't we try to find a reasonable solution? I know you're upset, but reasonable? Sarah's voice rose, her eyes flashing with barely contained fury. Mike, they're the ones who aren't being reasonable. They're the ones who tried to take down our flag, our symbol of freedom and patriotism. And now, they want to drag us through the courts. She shook her head, her expression hardening. No, Mike. This ends now. I'm not backing down, and I'm not going to let them win. This is war. With that, she turned and stormed out of the room, leaving Mike to stare after her, a growing sense of dread settling in the pit of his stomach. He knew Sarah was stubborn, but this was beyond anything he could have imagined. As the sound of her footsteps faded, Mike sank into a nearby chair, his head in his hands. What have we gotten ourselves into? The courtroom was tense as Sarah and Mike Hendricks sat across from the HOA's legal team, their faces etched with determination. The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, eyed the parties with a discerning gaze. We're here today to address the ongoing dispute between the Hendricks family and the Oak Ridge Estates Homeowners Association, she began, her voice cutting through the silence. Both parties have filed lawsuits, and it's my job to sort this out. She turned her attention to the HOA's attorney, a slick-looking man in a tailored suit. Mr. Simmons, Your clients are claiming the Hendricks are in violation of the community bylaws. Would you care to elaborate? Simmons rose, his expression oozing confidence. Thank you, Your Honor. The Oak Ridge Estates HOA has very clear guidelines regarding the display of decorations and signage on residents' properties. The American flag flown by the Hendricks violates these guidelines, and we've asked them repeatedly to remove it. Sarah's grip on the armrest tightened, her eyes narrowing, but Mike placed a restraining hand on her arm, silently pleading with her to stay calm. The judge nodded, then turned to Sarah. Mrs. Hendricks, your response. Sarah rose, her chin held high. Your Honor, the Freedom to Display the American Flag Act of 2005 clearly prohibits homeowners associations from restricting the display of the American flag. The Oak Ridge Estates HOA is in direct violation of federal law, and they threatened us with fines and legal action simply for exercising our constitutional rights. Simmons scoffed, drawing the judge's attention. Your Honor, the act the defendant is referring to applies only to certain types of restrictive covenants. Our bylaws are well within the bounds of the law. Sarah's eyes flashed with fury. That's a lie, and you know it. Your bylaws specifically prohibit the display of the American flag without prior approval, which is exactly what the law was enacted to prevent. The judge held up a hand, silencing the growing murmurs in the courtroom. Order, please. This is a complex legal matter, and I will need time to review the evidence before rendering a decision. She fixed the parties with a stern gaze. In the meantime, I'm issuing a temporary restraining order. The Hendricks will be allowed to keep their flag in place until this matter is resolved. Any attempts by the HOA to remove or damage the flag will be considered a violation of the order and will be met with severe consequences. Sarah felt a surge of triumph, while Simmons' face flushed with barely contained anger. The judge continued, I want both parties to submit all relevant documentation and prepare for a full hearing next week. Understood. Both parties nodded, and the judge dismissed the court. As they left the building, Sarah turned to Mike, a gleam of triumph in her eyes. See, Mike, I told you we'd win. Nobody messes with an American flag and gets away with it. Mike smiled, pulling her into a tight embrace. I'm proud of you, honey. You really showed them what you're made of. Sarah's expression sobered, and she pulled back to meet his gaze. This isn't over yet, Mike. The HOA is going to throw everything they've got at us. But I'm not backing down. Not now, not ever. Mike nodded, his own expression hardening with determination. Then I'm with you, Sarah. All the way. Hand in hand, they turned and headed home, the American flag still proudly waving in the breeze. The battle lines had been drawn, and the Hendricks were ready for whatever came next.